Hello, my name is David. Today we'll be covering the Matriarch from my Autodale Animated series. She is the gigantic biomechanical goddess strung up in Autodale Tower who seems to power the town and keep everyone alive. This character has existed for a very long time. She predates the animated series itself and has gone through a tremendous amount of redesigns and rewrites and thematic changes over the years. We have a lot to cover. This is going to be quite an interesting one. Please enjoy. Before the Autodale Animated series existed, back in 2016, inspired by video games like Deus Ex and movies like District 9, I painted this Don't Feed the Freaks illustration. This painting was part of a contemporary art college project that we were doing, and it's where Autodale came from. I've mentioned that a bazillion times, but what I often neglect to talk about is that a couple weeks later at college we started our painting module, and inspired by artists like H.R. Geiger, I painted this portrait, which I then expanded and expanded. The finished painting is almost 6 foot across, and at the time wasn't connected to my Don't Feed the Freaks illustration whatsoever. She wasn't even called the Matriarch back then. I remember a classmate told me that she looks like she'd be called Stephanie, so the painting is called Stephanie. I still kinda like this painting overall, but there's a lot of things that bug me about it. The technique is extremely amateurish, and the wonky proportions really bug me. I mean, them be some unreasonably large booba balloonas. A couple months later, in mid-2017, I decided to combine these two paintings, Don't Feed the Freaks and Stephanie, and create an animated short film and a world around them.
Are we sitting comfortably? Good.
The Matriarch makes her first animated appearance in the first film in the Autodale series, being Pretty. All I needed her to be was a personification of the biomechanical monstrosity that Autodale truly is, to appear at the end of the film as a stinger. I don't remember putting a whole lot of thought into what she actually was at the time. I had written very basic stuff, things like she was being used to run the town, that she was once a goddess that was tamed, bound and twisted by man, and that was pretty much it. The whole Autodale series to begin with I thought was going to be far more driven by ideas of robotics and artificial intelligence, computers. I remember being interested in exploring the robotic side of her back then. But as I further expanded Autodale into more films and drawings and stories, the series and the Matriarch totally dropped that angle, and I started to steer more into a dark fairy tale-like setting and tone. I think that this move was essential to the series' success. You can see me immediately course correct in the next film, No Monsters, which is literally about a fairy tale. On a technical animation level, there is no animation, she's a drawing. I literally took a picture of my painting, traced it in Photoshop, making sure to shrink down those booba balloonas, and that's it. I remember being unsatisfied with her design at the time, and I still don't like it. I think Being Pretty in general, on a visual level, has aged horribly, and looks like butts. In the following year, 2018, I released an animated short film called Mother of Nature. So many people seem to think that this film is connected to the Autodale series and the Matriarch herself, but it is not. The concept of the Mother of Nature, a life-giving and life-taking goddess as old as life itself, is somewhat similar to the idea behind the Monarchs, but really isn't one-to-one, which we'll cover later. This character is certainly a creative stepping stone, and important to mention here in a video about my creative process fleshing out the Matriarch, but the Mother of Nature short film itself was never supposed to be part of this series, so it isn't part of this series. Even if she does appear in Merry Madness as a cheeky little Easter egg. Essentially what I'm trying to say is, design, possibly canon, film, not canon, I have a dumb job. I then took a 1-year break from the Autodale series, and after deciding to return, I created a bunch of random Autodale related concept art to see if I could spark any creative ideas for new short films. One of these pieces was an illustration I created called The Fall. This piece of concept art was an idea that never really came to anything, but it gave me an opportunity to correct the Matriarch's design. I really like this redesign. This design is pretty much the design I've used for the Matriarch in every single illustration and short film since. In fact, her next appearance in Children's Toys about a month or so after I drew this was traced from this very drawing. In Children's Toys, the Matriarch has been updated from static 2D image to not so static 2D image. I like the effect a lot more, I like the design a lot more, and as a theoretical nightmare daydream of a little girl, her appearance worked out pretty splendidly. Where I feel Being Pretty has aged like a butt, Children's Toys I still think looks pretty damn good. But again, the Matriarch isn't really much in the film, she's just used as a visual personification of Autodale's deep, dark secrets. A little while after Children's Toys, I uploaded my animated short film Don't Feed the Freaks. This film doesn't feature the Matriarch, but it does feature multiple other Monarchs, introducing the idea that she's not the only one. This film forced me to totally straighten out all of the weird lore and backstory ideas I had for the Monarchs and the Withering World and the monsters outside of Autodale, and bring all of that to the forefront, set all of it in stone, and it's still one of my proudest films. This was the point where I had pretty much figured out what the Monarchs and the Matriarch were going to be. Ancient, ethereal things that give life to the land around them. One day, all of these essential beings started to wilt and fall. Some great inventor successfully captured and tamed a monarch, forming Autodale, and after seeing the great inventor's success, others tried to follow. Desperate to keep these things alive, others tried to capture these gods, dissect them through human means of medicine and mechanics, trying to keep them from dying, housing them like they were batteries, all of which failed. Every single monarch featured in Don't Feed the Freaks is seen in pain, screaming and trying to escape their captors as they died. And finally, after a 2-year Matriarch absence and more than 4 years since her inception, we have made it to my most recent animated short film, Immortal Machine. We have only seen snippets of the Matriarch at this point, but this is the film that finally actually explores what she really is. In the film, we see two versions of the Matriarch, her ancient wilting goddess form and her final Matriarch form. The wilting goddess design was heavily inspired by the works of Guillermo del Toro. I designed her to look like a nature-themed goddess that was sick and dying. These beings are supposed to be personifications of the earth around them, so during this time of great withering and sickness, she looks like a vaguely humanoid, malnourished, faceless, rotting tree. But during Autodale's height, she has twisted into a far less withered, more humanoid, biomechanical monstrosity of flesh and metal with a pretty face attached to it. In preparation for this film, knowing that I was going to have to fully render the Matriarch in 3D for the first time, I wanted to create a full 3D sculpture of the character, a character that so far had only been rendered in 2D, and also 2D. I started work on 2 clay sculptures for this film, a sculpture of the Mayor, which I finished, and a sculpture of the Matriarch, which I did not finish. If given more time, I would have definitely finished this sculpture, but the pre-production for Immortal Machine was taking far longer than I was expecting, and in the end I deemed making a sculpture of the Matriarch something that I had to sacrifice to start working on the film as soon as possible. Creating the 3D asset for the Matriarch was quite a task. The Matriarch is pretty huge, and she has the highest resolution textures of any character I've ever made because of that. I was aware that when the Matriarch's face would be on screen, it was very likely going to take up the whole screen. She was going to have a lot of close-ups. Her tomb is pretty detailless as well. She is the room here. She is the set. This extremely tedious texture work was made less soul-destroying when I realised that you only see the Matriarch from the front. To save my sanity, I left her back half completely blank. Alright, I might have lost a little bit of sanity. The Matriarch's final design in Immortal Machine stays pretty close to my design from the fall, just with a few mostly minor alterations. The one big difference being that the Matriarch has arms now. In every single appearance the Matriarch has ever had, her arms stopped at the elbow. This is something I've never really liked, and it's something I've kept up just because my original painting didn't have arms. But my original painting was never supposed to be this character. It was just some painting of some cyborg lady, and I don't remember why I never gave her arms. This character is literally an ever-changing being whose appearance is constantly evolving to fit her ecosystem, so technically having her change slightly every time she appears does make a lot of sense, but not having a deliberate reason why for these things, like the armlessness, is just bad character design. It's a nasty byproduct of the hodgepodge wobbly ass creative process this character has gone through. Her final appearance in Immortal Machine, her redesign, I feel is both pretty faithful to the original painting, but is changed enough to make the most sense in the context of Autodale's narrative. It's the best she's ever looked, and I think I'm finally satisfied with it. Until I change it again, obviously. The Monarchs were ancient, mysterious, wandering things, life-giving beacons, ever-changing in appearance to mimic the land and creatures around them. They are wandering ecosystems that one day started to wither away. The cause of the withering is unknown. Perhaps it was a natural event, perhaps brought on by human hubris. It isn't totally clear. One of these monarchs was the wilting goddess, who was ensnared by a great inventor, and through a series of experiments, atrocities, surgeries, mechanical engineering and human sacrifice, the great inventor managed to keep her alive. Around her, a tower was built, and a wall, and a town.
She is all that keeps us safe. A beacon of the old world.
Something I'd like to talk about here is the Mayor and Matriarch's relationship, because it's quite a complicated one. What originally seemed just like an essential asset, the engine to his Immortal Machine, slowly became his focus. the surgeries and engineering and sacrifices were not enough to keep the goddess at bay. The two are literally tethered in mind and well-being. The mayor has a cable running out of his brain, down his spine, into the heavens, which leads into the back of the matriarch's head. The two are connected. This is what granted him such long life. He keeps her alive with his immortal machine, and she in turn keeps him from dying as well. Both have changed drastically together, rotting and evolving into the monstrosities they've become over many, many years.
What we've become. What Autodale has to do.
The mayor has grown extremely fond of the matriarch. Not only is she the heart of his achievement, his immortal machine, but she is also the only one he has spent any time with for 10,000 years. They have experienced so much together, completely changed together, even if they have never actually spoken. In the film, the matriarch standing on her situation is extremely unclear. We don't know how she truly feels about this man who is keeping her alive and keeping her prisoner. I deliberately tried to portray her as somewhat indifferent to it all.
It was all necessary.
He clearly seems to have some kind of love for her, but it's unclear as to whether or not she feels anything for this little thing that keeps her living. Back when Immortal Machine was split into two films, this question was a very large part of the story. What does she think? Does she appreciate all he's done for her? Does she want to be set free? Does she want to wither away with the rest of her kin? Does she even care at all? The mystery of this character is part of her appeal. We don't know what she wants, we don't know how she thinks. Should we feel sorry for her or should we be scared of her? We just don't know. Making a creative process video on this subject was quite difficult, because this is part of Autodale's story that is very likely subject to change. Almost all of this could change and has been changed as the series has gone on. To illustrate what I'm trying to get across here, we should talk about this little girl that everybody keeps asking me about. This character was never supposed to be the mayor's daughter. In the original script, this character only appeared once and was just supposed to be some random sick girl. Immortal Machine was a production nightmare. I changed nearly everything about it many times as I went. That random little girl's part expanded and expanded and expanded during this process to the point where watching the film, it became pretty implied that that girl means more to the mayor than just some random kid. I both like and don't like the idea of changing this girl into being his daughter. If she is, then storytelling logic says she has to fulfill a purpose, right? And the obvious answer is that this girl and the matriarch are somehow connected. This could be through the healing process you see in the film or through some unseen melding of the two. I can imagine the mayor's daughter becoming sick or growing old, and in desperation he fuses her to the matriarch to keep her alive forever. Again, I both love and hate this idea. On one hand, this kind of makes sense. His immortal machine exists to keep his daughter alive, and the matriarch is the last he has of her. It also makes Autodale's logo in Being Pretty accidentally genius, in retrospect, for being an image of a dark-haired little girl in the same position that the matriarch is in. But, on the other hand, this totally recontextualizes not only the matriarch's purpose, but the mayor's whole motivation, his personality, and the purpose of Autodale itself. All because I accidentally gave too much screen time to some random little girl. If it matters to anybody at the moment, she's still just a random little girl to me, but that could definitely change in the future. That's my point. What I'm trying to say here, and throughout this whole video, is that the creative process can be messy as hell sometimes. Sometimes it's smooth, and sometimes it's this. The Matriarch character specifically, because she has existed for so long and has changed so much, is a perfect example. And I'm sure a handful of things I've already talked about here will be reinvented and changed again 2 or 3 films down the line. Things get redesigned and things get reshaped to mean different things as they progress. Arms appear where there were no arms before, nonsense piles up on top of and replaces other nonsense, and oversized cyborg booba balloonas shrink. If you want to support me or read any of my sketchbooks I've been showing off in this video, you can! They're all available on my Patreon page right now. Please consider supporting me and giving all of this stuff a cheeky read if you want. Now, it's walking time. It's late, it's dark outside, I have been recording for 52 minutes. Jeez. But yeah, I have been told by the internet that around about this time of the year, and on nights like these, which are kind of damp and warm, is the best time to see toads early in the year. I haven't seen a toad for about 6 months, so wish me luck, guys. Special thanks to all my top Patreon supporters on screen right now, superimposed over man, I hope a toad, or a frog, or a newt, or something. If it's just some grass at night, I'm gonna be very disappointed. Anyway, again, special thanks to all the scrolling names right now, and thank you all for watching this far. 53 minutes, jeez. Bye guys.